Hot Water History, episode 139, Thursday night, a little later. Richard, what's going on?
Just the delay means that the audience is pining for our episodes all the more, Charlie. So glad to satisfy and scratch that itch.
Did you watch the debate?
Yeah, I did.
You did.
I did. I put myself through the pain, and it was painful. I felt this terrible sort of gloom and darkness fall over me during the whole thing.
Black pill?
It was it did induce some pessimism, I have to say. Um, a clear misanthropy that comes in when you think about how the de-evolution of American political discourse has rendered two people who just get up there and bleat on and on about vacuous talking points that they neither of them really believe in or I mean at the level of exchange and dialogue was so infantile. I mean, to call it juvenile would be too much of a compliment. And then uh, the everyone was screaming about how the moderators were so unfair to Trump, but what were you to expect? This is ABC News. I mean, you got to go in there and I mean, he's been successful at negotiating extremely hostile moderators and audiences before. Be prepared. I mean, I was on, as you saw, with Robbie last night on Run Your Mouth, and we did get to talk a little bit about he Trump had so many ways in which to crush her in the debate, and I it did occur to me halfway through the debate that she got the questions again. She obviously got at least a semblance of what the questions were going to be and topics to be discussed. And then furthermore, with all the fact checking that the moderators, especially David Muir, did on Trump, how did they just randomly anticipate that he was going to bring up the ducks and the cats being killed in Springfield for voodoo and nutritional purposes by the Haitian refugees? The guy had a fact check right there. This was all orchestrated that way. I mean, so I, I had no, I just found myself to Dave and Robbie's credit, because they did a whole episode on part of the problem as well, just yesterday. And they picked out all the things that she just put on a tee for him. And then he could have set up and knocked out of the park himself. And he just whiffed over and over and over again. I mean, and there were points in which, and I'm rooting for the guy. There's no more self-evident evil than the Democratic establishment, the Democratic Party, DNC, deep state establishment, which has thoroughly not just adopted, but espoused and married and wed itself to neoconservatism. I mean, she's up there bragging about how she's got endorsements from Romney and the Cheneys. And dear God, our episode tonight is going to be focused on one of the reasons why, sadly, the elder Cheney rose to immense prominence in American politics and history. But the debate, she just, there were so many infuriating points where you just want to take Trump's mouth at times and just say, this is what you argue here. Instinctually, he knows it's the weirdest thing. Whereas you're kind of used to people in your daily life who operate from both a knowledge base and then a worldview, and they exercise whatever amount or modicum of virtue they have, and then they sort of lead their lives according to that structure. Trump forgoes all of that, and in place of knowledge and preparation, he has this innate instinct that gets him to the good, but he doesn't have any principles. He isn't able to articulate why his instincts are good at this. I will admit that by and large, his instincts are good, but what does that mean in a debate? You have to make an argument. And he was up there rambling on, and it became so infuriating. He was so self-contradictory at times. He It's just like, this is not some grand intellect, even if she has the questions beforehand, even as she's memorized her lines, even as she lied over 100 times. It doesn't matter. Knock her down. This is not some gigantic intellect with whom you're debating. You're not debating with Gore Vidal. You're not debating with Voltaire. You're debating with Kamala Harris. She can't string a coherent thought together outside of these, as I said, memorized talking points. It was infuriating. I have to admit to you too, Charlie, I went to bed despairing and I woke up in an even kind of darker place after watching that debate. I can't explain even why, because of course my political philosophy, everyone by this point who's listened to the show more than for 15 minutes or once or twice knows that I'm an anarcho-capitalistic Catholic. So I want the destruction of the state, hopefully through peaceful means, but it's got to go. And I did tweet after the debate, and I said, essentially, and I'm just summarizing here, is that there's no respect. There's not even a nod or a scintilla of deference to the free market. There, there's not even a mention of it. Trump did call her a Marxist, but Trump is a New Deal Democrat who is of the mindset, let's say it's an element of his instinct, that government ought to be helping people. He has a plan for this. He has a plan for that. He has a concept. After he made fun of Kamala for not having an economic plan, he then actually said out loud that he has a concept of how to replace Obamacare. So the same tact, the strongest point that he could make, that this woman could have altered policy so as to stop the flow of refugee migrants and illegal aliens into the country and the like. All these, it could have done something to stem the tide of inflation from an economic perspective. For 3.5 years as vice president, she could have, as the borders are, done something or what have you. Correct? The guy was president for 4 years. He's had another 3.5 years to prepare for his second term. He legitimately won the previous election and he still didn't have some sort of plan. What was infuriating, as I said to Robbie last night, is he has this whole one principle that he seemed to adopt was that the overturning of Roe versus Wade regarding abortion was indeed a great thing. Why was it a great thing from his perspective? Because it deconstructed the issue, made it less of a national issue and more of a federal one. Deference to the states. That's his easy out. He could have used that federalism notion, local is better or what have you, more democratic and more representative to be sure, than getting the mechanisms and the tentacles of the national government involved. He could have used that and applied federalism to, he could have just said healthcare. We're going to take away the exchanges restrictions, these artificial restrictions that they can only be, they're restricted according to state boundaries, and allow them to compete in a national marketplace for healthcare. There you go. There's your answer. That's your out. I mean, the other, what was the other one? And then pivoting from that, he could have just argued that he's a constitutionalist and said the one thing that you had responsibility over, the one thing you didn't, in the most sinister of way, cause or bring about the centralization of power and then its application in the most injurious ways to individuals and communities and localities. The one thing you should have done is the constitutional that gives the the national government, particularly Congress, but once empowered by Congress, the executive branch, to indeed adjudicate it, issues of naturalization and immigration. It's it it's just like the Francis pontificate. One of the major issues from day one. He universalizes things that ought to be localized decisions, and he localizes things that ought to flow from the universal head of the church and from his authority as Roman pontiff. And it in that failure to recognize proper sovereignty, proper adjudication, a proper authority, you have the surest signs that he's not a good pope.
So he lost the debate.
Well, I don't know if he lost. I don't think any. I think
We
he
we all
just,
lost.
well, that's cliche, but every time any politician in the modern era gets up and does this kabuki theater of a debate even mattering or the political process even being some, again, representation of where the country's at or where it wants to go, where, and it pains me to speak of the country as if it has one general will in a weird Rousseauian sense that, of course, the elites have to interpret, but what that is and how that's to be applied and implemented. But be that as it may, yeah, the fatal conceit that anything toward the benefit and the advancement of the American people, the general population, is going to be achieved through this political process that's so rife with both idiocy and corruption. As you said in a number of very astute tweets, you're not going to vote your way out of this or keep going to the ballot box, or how did you put it in tweets?
We just got to get out there and vote, though.
Yeah, we just got to get out there and vote. That'll save it all or solve it all.
What's the best debate you've ever seen?
The best debate, I mean,
Regardless of
debate?
presidential or not. What's the single best debate you've ever seen?
I'll tell you one of the most informative and entertaining, if you go back, it's on YouTube, is Michael Malice and Tom Woods debated over Hamiltonian
Seen that.
philosophy. Uh, Not only was it educational and edifying, it was thoroughly and just engrossing and entertaining, really entertaining. You're just locked in from the first time these two really brilliant men spar. The debates, if you go back even further, as much as I detest William Buckley, he did have a powerful intellect, and he had a series of debates with Gore Vidal, the aforementioned Gore Vidal. Maybe that was in my subconscious, thinking about good debaters and exchanges. Um, I'm trying to think of other debates that were so. Oh, what although I don't consider it a debate, when Milton Friedman went on Donahue. You ever see those episodes? I mean, Phil Donahue just passed away last month, famous TV talk show host. And he had Milton Friedman on in the early 80s, I want to say. And Friedman just walks him through deconstructing all of his progressive notions, which is, and to Donahue's credit, he was much more receptive to having his mind changed. And it was evident to the audience both on television and I would just assert in the studio or assume in the studio that this was a real, not so much meeting of the minds, but a real discussion that could lead to something. And there was an openness to learning more from this guy. So those are good ones. Can you think of a
I
great
was
debate?
thinking of Malice Woods too.
Oh, good. I have to say, and this might sound like I'm just puffing myself up or tooting my own horn or any other cliche in which you want to uh, convey the meaning that I'm just blowing wind up my own ass. But some of the greatest debates that I've ever had the pleasure of witnessing were by my students in class. I mean, we had a debate about whether the Constitution is by its nature a totalitarian document. And I remember one of my students got up and said, a complete and utter, totally self-consuming, but yet utterly toxic dumpster fire, the Constitution. That was her intro in the debate. I I was just floored.
Wow.
Yes,
It's
because
one way
they
to kick it off. Yeah.
yeah, because they took my instruction about always starting, whether it's a presentation or a debate, with just hit people with it. Just start with a boom. When I was in speech class way back in Fenwick days of yore, when I was just a student there, we had a famous, you had him too, speech teacher. And he told me, and this was a guy who's taught communications and speech for something for 4 decades, probably, maybe more. And he shared with us a story about a kid who before every speech, he would actually bang on the rostrum. And you might think, well, that's Mussolini like or something like that. That would be something Hitler would do before the Nuremberg conference. But in point of fact, and it might be just a little bit off-putting, but all that did was when he hit the rostrum, it just drew everybody's attention to the speaker. And then the first question that people have in their minds after someone hits a rostrum or makes a noise is, why is this guy calling me to attention? And then, of course, it was incumbent upon that speaker to maintain the attention. It wasn't enough just to bang the rostrum or desk and then not hook them. But if you could bang the rostrum, then hook them with a powerful line, they're yours for the next 20 minutes. They're yours for, well, okay, maybe in this day and age, 5 minutes, but that's still a lot longer than the average attention span.
Richard Casey was decent.
Oh, yeah, I forgot my own. I forgot my own debates. Yeah. I don't have too many. And when I was at Fenwick and then or at Loyola, no one really wanted to debate me.
People
I had
were
open invitations out. Yeah, there was a lot of bobbing and weaving, never entering. Actually, it wasn't even bobbing and weaving. No one ever entered the ring. But
Yeah.
I'm sitting there in my trunks and my boots,
You're
and
ready to go. You
I'm
can't you
like
can't wait for this.
I'm like Apollo Creed and Rocky Four and James Brown. Oh, the Oak Park pen just fell down.
That's symbolic.
That is definitely leave it like that.
Yeah.
That's our that's your guardian angel saying, all right, enough of this.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, I'm like, and James Brown is blasting live, I live in America, and I'm dancing up there, but I'm just shadow boxing because no one was ever up there. The closest I came to was when to his credit, one of my sort of mentor professor who I was my colleague at Loyola. I won't mention him because he hates me now because I'm such a libertarian or ANCAP, which he finds detestable. But um, yeah, to his credit, we had a lot of great exchanges, and he was respectful at the time. He's not anymore. In fact, he told me not to contact him ever again.
Oh wow. You got
Yeah,
blocked.
yeah. So
Well, let's talk about 9/11.
please,
9/11 was yesterday. Well, it was 23 years ago yesterday. I think that 9/11 has become similar to July 4th, where it's that day, it's the anniversary, but you don't really feel much anymore. At least I felt pretty numb to the day, as
Mm.
terrible as that sounds. But July 4th, I remember doing the post July 4th episode, and we talked about how it feels a lot like the Super Bowl, where it's another excuse to hang out and have some beers and not work.
Some fireworks.
9/11 feels the same way, just sad, if that makes sense. And just a little numb to it. But
What's the source and cause of the sadness for you, or numbness, if you will?
I mean, as the years go by, it gets further and further away. I mean, it's still obviously a terrible event, but it's weird to think about it this way. But at a certain point, some people are going to think about 9/11 the way I grew up thinking about Pearl Harbor, where it doesn't really cross your mind. Cross your mind. I don't. I wonder how many people would even know the date of Pearl Harbor if you asked. Obviously, 9/11 is pretty obvious, but I think it's going to eventually get to the point. Just as the years go on, it just you kind of shrug it off a little bit. But 9/11 to me is the litmus test to whether it's become the litmus test to me whether someone is brave enough to have an unpopular opinion. Because if you don't think anything fishy was going on, if you believe the official narrative surrounding that, I can guess what you believe about 20 other things.
Mm.
But 9/11, if you don't think that anything fishy was going on with that at all, it'd be like
You're mildly retarded.
it'd be like a varsity basketball player that can't get through the layup lines.
Just clanging it off the backboard every time.
It's just the warm up. You're not even ready for the game. You have no idea what's
Right.
coming next. So, seeing
Well,
some
you shouldn't
more.
even be in the game. You should be seated and just sitting and listening to the people who are.
You might not even be capable for that
Mm, that might
if
be
if
too.
you're not able to get through the layup lines. You might just be in
Yeah.
the wrong
Right.
sport or area. That's how I feel about 9/11 now.
So is COVID awakenness a bigger litmus test, or is it thoughts about 9/11?
That's an interesting one because COVID, I'm thinking about people my age, and everyone sort of lived through COVID.
Yeah.
Some people were alive, some weren't for 9/11. 9/11, you actually have to do some digging and you actually have to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. But that one takes a little more work. So I like that. I like the 9/11 one better than I think COVID is probably a better litmus test for someone's beliefs. But history, conspiracies, people know I'm into conspiracies, quote unquote. They've been known this since I was in high school, since I was in your class.
Mm.
And I've always held the stance that the other ones it gets a little fishy at some parts, but 9/11, even in high school, I was saying I don't even consider this one. I actually, funny enough, I would say 9/11's a layup. That's what I would tell people.
Mm-hmm.
I would say 9/11's a layup. That this one's not that crazy. Some of the other ones might be a little more far-fetched, but not what was going on yesterday. And one thing we should talk about, and you should play the clip. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld on September 10th, 2001 comes out and says that $2.3 trillion in the Pentagon cannot be accounted for.
Sure, you might not believe Charlie, but here's the clip.
We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions. We cannot share information from floor to floor in this building because it's stored on dozens of different technological systems that are inaccessible or incompatible.
And so some people were going to take the fall for that. But in a post 9/11 world, what happens the next day? No one's really remembering that. And this is another reason why I like 9/11 more than COVID. YouTube wasn't around in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Donald Rumsfeld realized that this many people would have access to this press conference 23 years later. That we think about the millions of people that have the ability to watch that press conference. I don't think Donald Rumsfeld woke up that morning and said, "Oh shoot, we got to worry about YouTube and TikTok picking this one up." So I have a ton of respect for pre-social media, quote unquote, conspiracies, because the seeds and the roots are a little stronger.
What is it for you that, pardon the wording here, but blows up the standard consensus 9/11 commission explanation the most? I mean, and maybe you have to list a top 3 or 4 that just utterly devastates the notion that 12 or dozen or so radicalized Islamic hijackers funded and supported by Osama bin Laden in Afghani caves in the Hindu Kush carried out these attacks. Notice,
So
maybe I sounded like an ABC moderator there with the leading question, but forgive me if you could detect the cynicism in it.
So Donald Rumsfeld's up there, that one. NORAD, the North, I'm gonna mess up I
No, is
used
it
to be super sharp on this. The North
no?
American,
Uh,
go ahead. What were you
no,
gonna say?
NORAD, the North American Readiness Defense System, or something like that.
It's something air defense, I
Air
believe.
defense. But I was going to interrupt you and just say it is true that the area of the Pentagon that was destroyed and hit by, we'll just say at this point, a plane, likely not, but the plane was the area where accounting and records pertaining to the missing 2.3 trillion were located.
Yes.
That's confirmed.
Yes.
Okay, so
If you want a quick top 3 that stick with me, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, so it doesn't really stand for NORAD. They were running a test drill at the same time. So there were fighter pilots in the area that were basically think about doing a fire drill in a school as someone lights the school on fire.
yes, good,
So these
good analogy.
responders didn't know whether this was a drill or real life scenario, real life situation. That a lot of people don't know this one. So there's some more obvious ones, but there's ones that stick with me more. Bush and Cheney, when they were interviewing for the 9/11 commission, they refused to go under oath and they refused to interview separately. I just think that anyone that has siblings, when your parents are interrogating you about something, you want to make sure the stories are the same.
United Front.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one. There was some
I mean,
other weird.
I'm surprised Building 7 hasn't made.
Yeah, I was gonna say Tower 7. Most people don't even know about Tower 7 as well.
Really, I, I
I think if
at
you
least in the
polled,
circles of 9/11 truthers that I
yeah, I think if you
like, that
polled
that's
the
usually the
majority of
first thing,
people,
and the controlled demolition that obviously transpired there. But and then furthermore, the whole means by which the Port Authority of New York had given over these businesses to a developer, and then like, did you see the Alex Stein clip when he went to New York this
no,
past 9/11? We He mentions he's taking us down this story about how there was the buildings were just laden with essentially permanent asbestos. And so you have this mogul and Jewish developer who had purchased the buildings from the Port Authority at a discount, a wild discount, but it was all because it would have to the buildings would have to be stripped of this toxic asbestos. And boy, that does create a condition by which it would be better for some things to down the buildings so as to reap the insurance and financial windfall and reward after that.
right,
Be wild if the guy was somehow connected to Mossad. Just throwing that out there.
yeah. Tower 7, when I ask most people, or they know I'm into 9/11, explain more. How many towers fell just in New York? They a lot of times they just say two.
Mm.
And I'll say two, and they'll say two, the Twin Towers.
Wow.
That's how a lot of the conversations go.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I haven't confirmed this one in a while. I'm trying to find it now, but everything's so whitewashed. But the United Flight 93,
The one that crashed in Pennsylvania?
yes.
Okay.
When people were calling, when people were calling their loved ones on the plane, or at least trying to call, there were transcripts that people were using their full names
Oh, I've heard this. Yeah. Who
with
calls
their
people by their full names?
loved ones. Mom, the plane's going down. This is Charlie Westerman.
Mm-hmm.
So that one, I haven't. I've heard that one before, but I haven't really dug too deep into that one.
Have you investigated when Delingpole had Captain Dan Hanley on?
Mm,
That was
I
uh,
listened to that episode.
he and the fellow 9/11 whistleblowers, and he's the director of the 9/11 pilot whistleblowers organization, which you can find and do more investigation on at 911pilots.org. So this is a guy who had both military and civilian flight training. He knew all the advanced plane systems. The the thing that hit me like a sledgehammer when he went on Delingpole's podcast and talked about this, that for him is the most definitive proof is that those so he got, what was it, 12 or 13 of the best crack, most experienced commercial airline pilots, and they put him in a simulator, and they said, okay, do the corkscrew flight pattern or the dive that was necessary to plunge into both the Twin Towers or the Pentagon. How was that accomplished? Of the 12, we're talking about the best pilots in the world from his perspective and some of the most experienced. They all failed. They all failed. And they failed to such an extent that afterwards they said those maneuvers are impossible. So if they were planes, and I'm doubtful that in the case of the Pentagon it was a plane. I mean, video evidence suggests that it wasn't. But if if they were planes going into the World Trade Centers, for example, and the dives that were undertaken, I mean, his theory, which seems to hold the most water for me and that which I'm most convinced of, and he has evidence backing this, is that the piloting systems were remotely hacked and taken over, and then the planes were used as projectiles into the buildings. Were you taken by that, or am I alone?
No, you're not alone.
Okay.
I was going to mention the degree of difficulty
Yes.
to pull everything off.
Well, it's not even to call it a degree of difficulty. I would just assert that that's a misnomer. It's an impossibility. It's an aeronautical impossibility that, at least in the case of the Pentagon attack, or the destruction of that wing of the Pentagon that happened to have the records pertaining to the audit or what have you, that it's an as I think Danny Henley even says it, it's just an aeronautical and physical impossibility in terms of piloting something like that.
Yeah.
And so the idea that these men who couldn't fly single engine Cessna planes could carry these maneuvers out even in the Twin Tower attacks is, to me, the most convincing proof that this is a the whole 9/11 plot and what is nothing like what they purported it to be.
So this is another reason why I like 9/11 better than COVID. It pops back into my head.
Mm.
Enough time has been removed that it's not politicized in the current state. So people are a little more free to it's a better measurement of whether people are free of thought than COVID, where it was more team versus team as far as blue versus red. But there's some blue that really don't like George Bush that will
Yes.
believe that 9/11 is an inside job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
That and with the hindsight being 2020 for over 24 year or 23 years now, you can ask with some level of clarity in the answer who benefited from this, what transpired as a result. And it's not a leap, it's not a difficult assertion or argument to make that with the regime change wars all benefiting certain states as opposed to others, certain classes and certain interests as opposed to others, in fact, to the detriment of the American middle class and the American poor, well, it's quite evident that you don't have to be some sort of puzzle wizard to connect the dots to see that, of course, what this spurred on was a type of acquiescent but fervent, albeit misplaced nationalism that led to the destruction of vast swaths and classes of American society. And what's left is a husk or a shell of what it was. Even as you and I would assert that we're not even talking about really America anymore by 2001. But the remnant of the eternal and perpetual welfare warfare emergency state that arose after World War II was resurrected with such, again, obsequious civility, not civility, servileness, that it's like we made our own destruction. We saw it in a way. 9/11 is the revelation of the method. And from that point on, the demons have used certainly the American deep state as their preferred playground and mechanism by which to really squash a lot of the good, the true and beautiful. These transcendentals that used to be around and operative.
And one thing that scares me to death is that people always say this. I've heard this so many times. The most united America's been as a country, September 12th, 2001.
Yeah.
It just makes me want to throw up hearing that.
Yeah. And think about the courage of men like Ron Paul and Harry Brown, who were willing to, in the case of Harry Brown, the day after, I mean, we're talking about September 12th, talk about blowback and the truly virtuous audacity they displayed in warning, constantly warning and trying to educate and awaken people to what the onslaught they were condemning themselves to, how it was going to unfold if they simply blindly and again as slaves to the slaughter just went along with the regime's bloodthirst.
I don't have much else to say on this issue, to be honest with you.
Nor do I, but I'm glad you reminded me of several points that at least you rely upon to assert and maybe even engage people in some sort of exchange about waking them up about 9/11 truth.
Do you want to talk about a town that hasn't woken up?
I don't, but it's part of our thing. It's our gig.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
You should go to your gay suburb now.
You know what it is? The people's favorite segment. OPRF shares convergence plan to address anti-Semitism claims.
Oh man.
Oh, the flag. So the district is currently in phase 1, said district official. Oak Park and River Forest High School District 200 has shared a detailed plan regarding its partnership with the nonprofit Convergence, which aims to address claims of anti-Semitism at the high school.
And it receives the entirety of its funding from the ADL.
In a written statement of commitment emailed to district families on August 13th, Superintendent Greg Johnson announced the high school's plan to create an inclusive environment following discontent and accusations of anti-Semitism during the last school year. That plan included a partnership with Convergence, a nonprofit organization focused on solving social challenges through collaboration. In the Convergence proposal to OPRF provided to Wednesday Journal by the district, the organization provided a 3-phase approach to address the quote challenges and help enhance skills of district and community members to aid in the bridging of divides to solve problems. The 3 phases are: 1, conducting a comprehensive assessment. Everything needs an assessment. Everything needs a survey.
Yeah, there's and a great point about surveys. And Brian Kaplan, the great economist at George Mason, as well as Ludwig von Mises himself in Human Action, he says, get rid of questionnaires and surveys. The only means by which you can determine someone's subjective valuation is through their action. It is always deductive. It's never inductive. So the notion that you can, because people fill out questionnaires and the results and conclusions that you draw from them are so spurious and oftentimes just inaccurate about their true intents, motivations, and appetites. So they're utterly useless, determined through their action.
2, convening and facilitating a collaborative problem-solving group. And 3, supporting the implementation of consensus recommendations. According to Karen Sullivan,
People get paid
executive
to do this. Isn't it wild? People get paid to do this. I mean, it's just
paid a
oh my
lot.
God.
It's not just paid. Paid an enormous amount
They get paid
for the
enormous amount,
work.
and they actually have the power and authority to create policy by which people are mandated to follow.
According to Karen Sullivan, executive director of communications for D200, the district, quote, committed to its relationship with Convergence on August 9th, and a final written agreement is still in the process of being formalized by the business office.
Everything's a process. You know what? The funny thing is, the first 5 or 6 paragraphs that you read could have been summarized in 2 sentences so far.
The district is currently in phase 1, Sullivan said. Sullivan told Wednesday Journal on August 29th that the decision to work with Convergence derived from, quote, dozens of meetings Johnson had with Jewish community members, including parents, students, and staff. Quote, given Convergence's expertise in building trust and bridging divides around complex, contentious issues, we're confident that their process will help move us toward our ultimate goal, creating a safe and welcoming environment for all students where differences are respected, Sullivan said. Did you see this? Did you read ahead?
No.
According to Sullivan, the partnership with Convergence is under the threshold of $35,000 in cost, which means the district did not need a vote from the Board of Education.
It's like moving money around, but just below the $10,000 threshold to avoid money laundering flags.
The cost of the program is quoted at $29,400, but does not include travel costs, which would be covered by OPRF. Tom Kofsky, board president, did not respond to a request for comment by time of publication. Phase 1. This phase includes interviews with up to 30 key stakeholders, including administrators, staff, faculty. They said staff twice. Administrators, staff, faculty, staff, students, parents, and community leaders. According to the proposal, the OPRF administration will be selecting who to include in the stakeholder interviews. The results will be summarized by key themes. The assessment will develop a comprehensive understanding of both specific and broad issues affecting the campus community. Convergence representatives said in the proposal. This includes the impacts of the events of October 7th and the ongoing war in Gaza, as well as broader concerns related to feelings of belonging, support, and the overall welcoming nature of the campus culture. Phase 1 is expected to take approximately 45 days following the signing of agreement with OPRF.
Wouldn't it be better to send the 35,000 to Gaza so that people can eat there? Or the children who are maimed by the relentless Israeli bombings and are left without appendages might get prostheses or something like that? No, we're going to expend that money to make people who are conjuring up in their minds the notions of self-victimization thousands of miles away. We need that to comfort them. What a decadent, disgusting culture in which we live, in which Oak Park lives.
Phase 2. In phase 2, Convergence will host a series of meetings of a, quote, collaborative problem-solving group. The group will be composed of 15 to 25 people and should reflect a diverse population of the campus community, including district faculty and staff, administration, parents, students, and community leaders. The group will discuss how to foster understanding of diverse perspectives, improve relationships, create a shared vision for navigating the tension around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict at the campus, and develop and implement recommendations to improve campus culture. Quote, it is critical that the issues explored during the dialogue sessions are framed in a way that promote dialogue, helping participants focus on the most pressing challenges, Convergence representatives said in the proposal. Why do they keep saying convergence?
They love the term.
According to the proposal, discussions are recommended to be framed as a way for teamwork to help identify the best practices and implement programs and policies. The problem-solving groups are expected to convene beginning in October 2024 and last through the remainder of the project. Okay, geez. Oh my gosh, So phase 3 is where they actually do stuff and they still don't do anything. Phase 3, Convergence proposed ongoing consultation services to help support the implementation of the recommendations that came from the problem-solving group. Support would be dependent on what the recommendations are, but can include facilitating strategy planning sessions to help develop actionable steps, design and facilitate specific dialogues, such as conversations between students, administrator, faculty, and staff, conduct listening sessions with other groups not included in the project, develop a quote sustained dialogue program on campus, develop dialogue focused curriculum that would be integrated into faculty lesson planning, deliver training to campus community members. Quote, we are in the early stages, but so far it has gone very well, Sullivan said. We look forward to the moving on to additional steps in the process as quickly as we can. Jeff Weisglass, a former D200 school board member and board president, is on the board of Convergence. Weisglass is also a donor to Growing Community Media NFP. So he got the
I
third.
love how they put in these qualifiers of how they're gonna structure topic. What if some kid just says, I don't really like how confining this dialogue's going. Can we talk about the Nakba or the Sturmgang or the gang, from 1948? The illegitimacy of the UN to impose upon Palestinians an entirely new state out of the purview of its authorities, even granted to it by the charter members of the United Nations. That kid's good. You're not operating within the dialogued parameters. You're out.
Four dead in Forest Park shooting on Blue Line train. This was a sad story. Authorities
Ooh.
say the victims were shot on the train as it headed into the terminal early Monday morning. 4 people are dead after a mass shooting on a Blue Line train in Forest Park Monday morning.
Why don't you ever hear about this stuff? I didn't heard this story.
Yeah, I heard about this.
Oh, okay. This is a mass shooting. I didn't hear anything
It
about
was on Labor Day. So I don't know.
Oh.
Authorities said 3 people were found dead at the scene. A 4th victim was pronounced dead later at a nearby hospital. A suspect is in custody, the news station reported. Forest Park Police and CTA security found the shooter on the Pink Line by using surveillance cameras. Robbery may have been a motive. Authorities said that the Labor Day holiday shooting was an isolated incident and that the public is not in danger. Quote, our public safety leaders believe that Forest Park is safe and that residents can and should enjoy the balance of the holiday weekend. Mayor Rory Hoskins told Forest Park Review, quote, it was a brutal incident, but police are confident that the shooter is in custody. Quote, we may or may not want to explore whether Forest Park through Westcom will someday have access to CTA's surveillance system, Hoskins added.
Yeah, why wouldn't Forest Park Police have access to that surveillance? What possible benefit would there be to keeping that from them? After all, they're going to be the apprehension harm of any criminal. Why wouldn't you share
that? Does
that?
seem kind of messed up. I've heard from the Lieutenant Governor today and from the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. The latter is offering potential support through their Office of Handgun Violence
Oh,
Prevention.
well, thank God. What are they gonna do?
The victims' identities were not released by 12:45 p.m. Monday. CBS reported police said that they may have been unhoused people.
No, yeah, not homeless, but unhoused.
A local news conference calling for a beat cop on trains and surveillance cameras nearby was scheduled for 12:30 p.m.
Can I interrupt for a moment? How do these two things, how are they consistent if robbery was the perceived motive and yet all of them are homeless?
What do you mean?
Well, why would someone rob a homeless person?
Oh, I don't know.
Doesn't seem like
Organizers said that they would offer a monetary reward for the person or people responsible.
Well, wait a second. I thought they said they apprehended the guy. This This is full of contradiction. The person or people responsible. So there are multiple people responsible
A
now?
local newspaper conference calling for a beat cop on trains. What is that? What is that? Am I reading that right?
Uh, I guess there was, yeah, why would a news conference calling or oh, okay, organizers called for a news conference that these organizers are calling for a beat cop on trains. And the organizers would offer a monetary reward for the person or people responsible. Well, so the organizers don't believe that the guy has been apprehended and that there might have been multiple murderers or shooters in this case. Read that CTA issued a statement about the shooting. Well,
The
I'm sure the CTA
CTA,
is going to clear it all up for us.
the CTA issued a statement about the shooting. This is just unbelievable. The CTA issued a statement about the shooting. CTA issued the following statement. Quote, although this was an isolated incident, the heinous and egregious act of violence should never have occurred, nonetheless on a public transit train. Okay.
Because that never happens on public
Yeah,
transit.
yeah. What a joke. As soon as this matter was reported, CTA immediately deployed resources to assist the Forest Park Police in their investigation into the matter, including review of all possible security camera footage, which proved to be vital in aiding local enforcement. We commend both the Forest Park Police Department for their thorough and collaborative efforts to provide information to partner agencies, as well as the Chicago Police Department, whose quick actions led to the apprehension of a suspect in this matter. CTA will continue to work with local law enforcement as part of this ongoing investigation. Blue Line service is temporarily suspended between Austin and Forest Park. Shuttles are available.
Great.
Last one. Illinois Holocaust Museum honors Dominican administrator Amy Ami and assistant director for justice, equity, and inclusion is among 3 honored with the inaugural Luminary Award. Amy Ami, assistant director for justice, equity, and inclusion at Dominican University, was honored by the Illinois Holocaust Museum for being and creating a positive change in her community on campus. Ami received the inaugural Luminary Award from the Illinois Holocaust Museum Young Professional Board and was presented with the award Tuesday, October 10th at the Young Professional Board's 10th anniversary fundraiser.
Wait a second. Tuesday, October 10th. That's in the future.
Huh. I assume they meant September 10th.
Okay.
Or I assume they meant September 10th.
Okay.
Ami was honored for her work with Dominican's Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Center, which aims to resist racial injustice and social inequity on campus and the community. Ami began her career at Dominican 14 years ago and has served in her current role for the past 3 years. Dominican University and the Cincinnati Sisters have a very strong social justice commitment.
No
Ami
shit.
said, I had the freedom to really explore those areas of social justice, and I got more involved in those activities and programs.
And while they have a very strong social justice value system and initiative, they have absolutely no connection to Catholicism whatsoever.
During that time, Ami's initiatives created racial healing circles, a practice where participants learned to, quote, see themselves in each other,
Oh, that sounds sexual.
according to a news release. Ami also helped create affinity circles.
We're in the circle. You know,
where
hey, hot co-ed, I'm seeing myself in you.
We're able to share needs and concerns. Both were open to students, faculty, and staff of Dominican. Circles come from indigenous practices. Ami told Wednesday Journal, explaining they is important to be mindful. That's literally what it says. They is important to be mindful and give gratitude to those, quote, who really developed this as a way of life for centuries.
What the hell are they talking
What
about?
are we talking about?
This is just blather.
Oh my
This is
gosh.
just blather.
What's the price for me? I think about this a little too much now. But the amount of money you would have to pay me to show up to one of these meetings and actually take it seriously, it's worse than whatever fantasy football punishment you can come up with. This would be the worst one.
It destroys the
Having
soul. All
having
of
to
this
show
destroys the
this.
soul.
Quote, we just need ways to be able to listen better, to get to know one another and understand that sometimes these misunderstandings are just the way we were socialized, Omni said. According to officials, Omni was instrumental in launching the College Leadership Summit, Make Your Voice Count, which is now held annually at the Illinois Holocaust Museum in Skokie. A former volunteer with the Illinois Holocaust Museum, Omni said she helped develop the program for almost 3 years.
Took her
Quote,
3 years to put together this bullshit.
it is such an honor to have contributed to the development of this incredible program and to be recognized by the Illinois Holocaust Museum for my involvement, Ami said in a statement. As a restorative justice practitioner,
Wow.
I am deeply committed to building community across culturally and spiritually diverse traditions and doing so in collaboration. As the assistant director for the Office of Justice, Equity, and Inclusion, Ami does work around LGBTQ plus competency as well as critical whiteness to help understand race as a social construct. Dude, what did I just read? What did I just read?
Well, I'm with her on the whole race is largely a social construct, but um, so is everything else around those identities that she's trying to impart competency for or of into people. Me as a white person, so she.
Oh, here we go. That's how all the best
She
sentences.
speaks.
That's how all the best sentences start. Me as
Yeah,
a white
exactly. It was
quote,
like a seventh grader would say in an answer to a teacher. Me as a white person. Go ahead.
quote, me as a white person, a lot of my focus has been on doing my own self-reflection to better understand how I have been socialized into a way of being and perceiving the world that has an internalized sense of dominance. Ami said.
What that doesn't. What the world has an internalized sense of dominance. What is she talking about? I have no
No,
clue.
she's saying her focus on her self-reflection. Basically, I think what she's trying to say, and I don't speak me as a white person-ish, but I think what she's saying is that she's been socialized into a way of being since she's white with an internalized sense of dominance for being
But she
white.
says perceiving the world that has.
I have been socialized into a way of being and perceiving the world that has an internalized sense of dominance.
Oh, that she has it. She has an
Yeah.
internalized sense of dominance as she's
From perceiving the world. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But what does that mean?
I don't know. Being recognized by YPD is the quote coolest thing, she said.
Eh.
There is a rise in anti-Semitism. There is a rise in Islamophobia. So how do we as everyday citizens take responsibility for that? Ami said, we have a role to play.
No, you don't. No, we don't.
How do you counteract
And
that?
notice these people in these nonsensical, absolutely inane positions have to constantly conjure up. They're living in such an irreality. They have to convince you that the irreality exists nonetheless, and that one, you're guilty for allowing it to occur if you don't work with them and support DEI or whatever they're doing. But they're so fervently praying. This is the weird thing. They say they're trying to combat anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, whatever it might be, anti-gay sentiment, homophobia. But their whole reason for being in their very personhood, in their identity, it relies entirely upon their being those perceived evils. So when notice how frustrated they get when people would assert that there is not a problem with race here. There's not a problem with. Imagine the March of Dimes people, the March of Dimes founded as a charitable organization, and polio is essentially eradicated from the earth, especially in the developed world. and they sit around and lament, well, we have to we need more polio people. We need more polio victims. Of course, the conclusion is that none of this is a real evil, or none of
Okay.
this is something that's transpiring to harm
All right,
people.
we're getting to the line of the week, and this might
You read ahead.
I might
Okay.
actually throw up.
All right.
How do you counteract that? By engaging and building relationships intentionally with people who are different from us, she added. And here it is. Here's the line of the week. Maybe we should get the choir to do a line of the week.
Mwah.
We might have to get them for the encore. Quote, otherwise, we risk losing the very democracy that was so hard fought after, she said.
A nonsensical blather. That doesn't make any sense.
The first Luminary Award was won by Ami, along with Micah Ariel Rohr, Assistant Director of the Israel Education Center at the Jewish United Fund in Chicago, and Dion Dawson, founder of Dion's Chicago Dream, a nonprofit dedicated to fighting food insecurity in Chicago. Why don't they just say hunger anymore?
Food insecurity, yeah.
By delivering fresh produce to people's homes. Quote, we are thrilled to have the opportunity to honor these three luminaries for the impactful work they are doing in their communities to make a positive change in the world, said YPD co-chairs AJ Greenberg and Melanie Lackman in a statement. Their day-to-day actions can inspire people of all ages to combat hatred, prejudice, and indifference, and serve as a reminder that every one of us has the ability to take a stand. Quote, it is a lot of fun, it is a lot of work, but I enjoy it, Ami said.
Well, why wouldn't you? Get paid to do nothing. To promote, to propagate your irreality. That was.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
What would have happened if I'd gone for it and just said, no, I'm gay.
Oh man, that whatever I had left, that last story took it out of me. That was a tough one.
Yeah, it's bedtime.
Buy Trinity Brewing stuff, everyone. Check out my latest Run Your Mouth episode with Robbie. And also go to the website. There's a lot of great stuff on the website. I directed a lot of people that were listening to Run Your Mouth to the website to buy the book, of course, listen to the podcast episodes, look at the blog, look at the various entries for European history and American history courses that I have, as well as essays, scholarly work, you name it, it's there. So take a deep dive. It's free content for people, and love to hear your thoughts, responses, challenges, you name it.
All right, everyone.
Peace. Take care.
God bless.